So I recently got asked this question by Gaston in the comments of one of my videos, where he essentially asked, how do you take a subject matter that is not normally present in Japanese style designs and incorporate it so that it looks like it is seamless within a Japanese style design? Something along those lines. So I thought today I would go into that topic and discuss a little bit about the difference between fusion style designs and more traditional styles. Now I have 6 points to go through. As I go through them, I'm going to be painting this Japanese Hannya mask tattoo flash design, and I really encourage you guys to paint something along with me. Okay, so my first point for this one is that you can't. So don't even try. I'm just kidding. You definitely can take a random subject matter of your liking and incorporate it into a style that already exists. What I mean by you can't is you can't really make it that style exactly. And the reason for that essentially is if it is not native to that style, it's always going to look just a little bit out of place. Even if you get all of these other tips right in creating a design that looks consistent with that style, it's always going to look just a little bit out of place because it is not naturally occurring within that style. For example, if you are doing something like an American traditional clipper ship and you want to put that in a Japanese style background, you can certainly do that. There's a lot of Japanese water-based backgrounds with their finger waves and various water-based creatures like dragons and koi fish that you could definitely include and incorporate something like that. But it's not going to look 100% natural, being that clipper ships are not an not a Japanese style boat. It's going to look really sort of awkward and out of place. But if you do things correctly in incorporating the certain style attributes and other elements surrounding it, you can still make it work as a cohesive design. Now, that having been said, a really important thing to keep in mind is that, style, in terms of keeping a traditional style, it doesn't really matter too much unless you are from that tradition and you are the one that's trying to keep that alive. I am somebody that has gone through phases of trying to do stuff that looks super traditional, which is really, really difficult unless you follow all of the rules. And most of my work ends up looking like this, which is something a little bit more neo-traditional. It still has Japanese elements to it, and I try to sort of keep things consistent with a traditional Japanese design. But of course, adding my own touch to this takes it out of that realm of traditional, and then we are looking at something entirely different. Although I do try to keep a lot of those traditional elements in my designs, as I feel like that sort of brings a lot of that traditional style through to my work. So, how are you going to create a design using a subject matter that's not present in Japanese design or in other forms of tattoo design? The first sort of advice that I have for you is to find reference material. Referencing is something that's really common. Pretty much all artists do it. And essentially what you're doing, it's not copying, you're sort of finding other images that sort of give you ideas on the general direction you can go in, and you can use those to influence your artwork. This is crucial in the beginning, especially when you haven't developed your own way of drawing things, your own style of drawing things, then referencing is going to be a really great way to do this. Now, what I encourage you to do in terms of trying to mix and match styles or create a fusion style is just look at how that style typically represents a subject matter. So for example, Japanese dragons or Oriental dragons are super common in Japanese style tattooing. Let's say you want to do a more American traditional piece. Well, there are American traditional Oriental style dragons that are based on Japanese style dragons, but they have an American traditional styling to them. So you can go ahead and find reference images of those, and you can go ahead and use those to influence the way that you do your line work, the way that you do your color and your shading, because those are the things that are going to separate your style from other traditional styles. Now, the second thing you can do is you can find similar subject matter and try to match the style attributes. This one's a little bit more tricky and it takes a little bit more practice, but essentially, if you can't find that subject matter within that style, like it does not exist, then you're going to need to find something similar so that you can then reference that style. So for example, if you're drawing a particular type of bird that doesn't exist within the Japanese style, you're not able to find any reference pictures within the Japanese style, you could go ahead and look at Japanese falcon illustrations, Japanese sparrow illustrations or tattoo designs, and you can reference the way that they are drawn. For example, the wings, the down feathers, the beaks, things like this. Reference the line work style and the color, the color code, the way that they have colored the design. You can reference those things and apply them to the bird that you're drawing, and that is going to help bring your bird design slightly across into that Japanese style, just that little bit more. Right, now tip number 3, this is where it gets even more difficult than the last one, but essentially is if you can't find anything, like you're shit out of luck, you cannot find a single reference image to sort of get the juices flowing and to give you some ideas, because that thing that you're drawing just doesn't exist in any of the styles you're looking at. What you might need to do is break it down into individualized components. So what do I mean by this? You're drawing something that has claws and you want it to look somewhat Japanese, then you may need to find something within the Japanese style that has claws. So whether that's a dragon, whether that is a foo dog, whatever the design is, you can then reference the way that the claws are drawn. It's pretty typical, I think, for Japanese designs and other traditional styles, American traditional or neo-traditional, to have a specific way of drawing certain things, and it's pretty common amongst a lot of those things. So an example of this is the head construction. If you look at the way that a tiger's head, a dragon head, an oni head, those things are drawn within a Japanese style, the general construction and layout is very, very similar. They all have somewhat human-esque faces. They're taken a little bit out of their sort of animal element, and they're given a little bit more character and a little bit more personality, and for that they've developed a little bit more of a human look with the sort of larger eyes, a little bit more cartoony, and so you can sort of reference those things and then apply those individual elements to whatever it is that you are drawing. And this is going to allow you to sort of pick apart whatever you're drawing and try to find things that are similar to it within the style that you are working in. Now, if you are enjoying today's video so far, please hit that like button. It really helps the video out. It helps the channel out, really, because it lets the algorithm know that you enjoyed this video and it recommends it to other people. And I'd like you guys to hit the subscribe button if you are enjoying today's video. That way you can stay up to date whenever new videos come out. Now, I forget what number we're up to, but the next one that we're going to be talking about is learning to understand the line work, the color, and the shading that's applicable to the style that you're working in. Now, one of the main components that makes up a style is the line variation, the way that they are shaded or rendered, and then the way that they are colored to be sort of finished. And this is going to vary from style to style. So if you look at something like an American traditional design or an old school design, generally speaking, all of the line work is going to be done with one single line weight. So all of the line weight is consistent, and there's a very limited color palette. Now, when you contrast this with something such as neo-traditional, where you have multiple line weights or variations in the line weight, as well as a large spectrum of shades of colors. This way you can blend from one color to the next, which is not something you'll typically see with an old school design. And if you look at something like the Japanese style, you're going to be looking at stuff that is based on old woodblock prints and paintings. And so because of that, a lot of it is quite expressive. The line work tends to have a bit of a brush aesthetic to it, where you have slight variations within your line instead of having a really smooth, consistent line. So if you are drawing more Japanese style, you may want to line using a brush nib to give it a little bit more character, give the line work a little bit more character, and this is going to help pull it into more of a Japanese style. If you were doing it in a old school style, maybe you want to stick with a single line weight and a really limited color palette. So that is another really important thing, is to really do your research about what style you want to be drawing in and want to be doing your designs in, and then you can apply the design attributes of that style as a whole to your design. And by understanding a little bit of the history and a little bit of the techniques that went into what influenced those designs, you can then begin to understand, oh, you know, he used brushes to line the design or whatever it may be, and that's why it looks the way that it looks. So the style a lot of the time is going to be dictated by the techniques and the supplies that were used to create the artwork. Now, the last one to talk about here is the background and the surroundings. So this one, I think, is going to be one of the ones that is most commonly seen, and I use it quite a bit. And so essentially what this means is, you know, by changing the background elements and the way that the image is displayed, this is going to change the style in a lot of ways, and this can really help you to bring some of those other elements we've just spoken about into the style that you're working in and give it a certain aesthetic quality. So to give you an example, here is a tiger illustration that I did not all too long ago, and this is what I would consider to be in somewhat of a traditional Japanese style. Now, I hate to sort of say the word traditional too much because I don't know all of the rules. I'm sort of still catching up on some of those things, and I try to sort of feel out the aesthetic of the Japanese style and follow within that aesthetic quality so that my work appears to be more traditional. And so in this case, I have a lot of the wind bars and spiral clouds, as well as the Japanese style rocks and waves incorporated into the design. And so this sort of gives it that traditional Japanese feel. Whereas if you look at this, in contrast to that, it's an individual tiger head. It's got some color blends. It's in a little bit more of a neo-traditional style, and it is a standalone drawing on a flash sheet of larger illustrations. So as opposed to the very common Japanese style of doing a entire sleeve design with a subject matter and background, or an entire front or back design with a subject matter and a background, this is more of a neo-traditional style or an American traditional style where it's a standalone design on a flash sheet. And so if you are sort of doing a Japanese design and you want it to look traditional, typically speaking, Japanese designs are going to have a background. They're going to look a little bit more like a scenery, like an actual painting, whereas the more old school or traditional style is to do that sticker or patchwork style effect. So if you are creating something within that style, you're going to want to do things that are standalone designs and maybe even incorporate them into a flash sheet with a whole bunch of other designs. And that's going to help you have that separation in the style of and appearance of your work. Now, that having been said, another really nice way to sort of tie the styles together, I don't know that this necessarily is going to help with your specific question, but to sort of marry the styles together, sometimes I just combine elements. So here I've done this lady head design, and I wanted her to have a somewhat of a Japanese aesthetic, I suppose. And so I've done this in a little bit more of a traditional or neo-traditional style design. However, I've incorporated peonies, which are not exclusively Japanese flowers, but they are more common in Japanese style tattoos and illustration, whereas in the more American traditional style, you tend to see a little bit more like of your classic roses, whereas these are peony roses, something that's more common with Japanese styles. And so by incorporating those, I'm able to take something that looks traditional or neo-traditional and tweak it slightly so that it just has that little bit of oriental influence to it. So this is another thing you can do to try and sort of marry the styles together in your own way, is you can incorporate various background elements such as flowers, clothing, sort of the sub elements that go in with your main subject matter. And if you can tie them together nicely, you're able to create something that looks like a fusion of the two styles. That's basically it for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope it answered your question. If you would like to know something or you have a question, leave me a comment in the comment section down below. Stay bold, be creative, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, bye-bye.